Hi class. So what I wanted to have this little mini lecture on was about producing speech. So specifically, we've discussed before about the ways in which we start to understand speech, right? So we start by beginning by just being exposed to speech, and then we start to understand what's going on, especially with like prosody and how we're talking. But what are the actual stages in producing speech? So I'm not just talking about spoken language, but also signing and writing. While right now I'm just going to focus on the speaking aspect of things, just because it's the easiest thing for us to pick up on in the first years of life. And it creates some very cute and wonderful little videos that I'll be showing you as we go along. So babies start making noises right away. If you really even think about the first things that they're communicating, infants cry and they are trying to communicate something, being held that they want, or maybe some food, for example. But they start to begin to produce different types of phonemes by cooing. So they start to do lots of oohs and ahs, maybe some of those guttural sounds like gugh kind of sounds. And that happens very early on. We start to get babbling where they actually combine two phonemes, a consonant and a vowel together. And this is seen in things by saying like baba, mama, dada. We start to see that this actually transforms over time. So it's not just that they're making this type of babbling sounds, but they also start to be able to use prosody during that, right? So if we really think about that the meaning is that melody, that's what infants are learning first and foremost. Well, that's also the same thing for how they're actually starting to produce their own language. So prosody is actually something that comes on a lot earlier than being able to say specific words. So they're the first things to be comprehended and the first things that they actually are produced. So I'm going to show you a short video of this. So I tried to make this a little bit quieter because sometimes this could be relatively kind of screechy, so hopefully it's not too bad on your end. So if we were to analyze this very cute example, we see a whole host of different things that these babies are doing. First, we have a lot of interactions together, right? So they are taking turns. We also can kind of like guess what type of conversation that they're having, right? We hear a lot of statements. I heard some questions. I saw a lot of gestures that are being done, right? So, it's almost like as if, the first baby over here is asking, hey, do you like my socks? And the second baby is giggling and saying, no, I don't like your socks, right? So there is something to be said about the prosody that they're showing you in that experience. So prosody and turn taking are two of the important things that they start to learn about the rules of language, right? So those two babies were taking turns. This is also something that happens with parents and when they're talking to a child, that they actually will do a lot of that turn taking. So once we get past babbling, we start to see the first words. And an easy way to kind of remember is by the first year, there are the first words and the first steps. So typically we start seeing those around the first year of life, but anywhere between 10 and 15 months of age is kind of developmentally normative. And typically the first words that we see are nouns. And it kind of makes sense with the way that some of the babies are learning language, especially when it comes to like the whole object constraint, for example, if you guys remember that when they're starting to learn a new word, they think it means an entire object. So objects are typically easier to think about than things like running, right? So what that object is actually doing. So it's typically nouns, and it's also constrained, or it's also trying to think of a different word for that. But it's also like helped by what type of sound it can actually make. So if you think back to the first vowels, it's usually consonant and vowel, right? Mama, dada, or mama, papa, those types of things. And typically what I do is we have people that speak different languages and how they actually say mom and dad. So what you'll notice is that a lot of languages around the world, the first words are mom and dad, and they typically, mom is mama, nana, oma, and dad is things like papa, dada, baba, for example, or tata, for example. And this is pretty cross-culturally, this is how we say mom and dad, and part of it may be due to the early things that infants are able to say. I have a great Atlantic piece that I will share with you all because I think it's pretty good. So once we get past those first words, what we start to see is holophrastic. Why can't I say that today? They're holophrases, right? They're one word that stands in for multiple words. So a really great example of this is being able to say up. So this conveys a whole host of things, right? This young baby is saying, I would like to get up, and, you know, his sibling, or Ren's sibling, is trying to actually pick her up. So this is where one word stands in for an entire phrase. This could also be things like cookie, right? That stands for I want a cookie. I'm going to show you some baby signs now. So here's a baby who's going to do a couple of different signs.
You're all done? Or do you want more? More? Can you say please? Please. There you go. You can have some more. Yeah, you can have some more. Good job. There it is. Yeah, mix it around. You want some milk? Okay, well, I'll go get your milk.
So that was a really great example of how even we have these one-word statements, even in sign language, right? More stood in for I want more, or this squeezing the bottle also stands for milk. So that means, can you go get me my milk? I would like my milk, right? So this is also something that we see even in sign language. And another thing that oftentimes starts to happen once children are starting to learn more words is that they might overextend or overuse a word. So a child has never seen this before but is familiar with dogs, so they may overextend that word to label it as a dog. And part of this is because of the size of the vocabulary, right? Children are starting to learn words, but it's still relatively small until they start hitting developmental milestones and start learning words a little bit more frequently. One of the great videos from Vine was, look at all those chickens! And she's pointing to a bunch of geese. So I highly recommend that you watch that if you haven't so far. So I wish I had more data on this because I would love to see how these first words come about. But this is just one person's tracking his son's first words since birth and when they start saying new words. So as you see here, his first word is uh-oh at around 7.5, close to 8 months of age. Then you start to see the word dada from somewhere around 10 months of age, mama around a year, and kitty. And then you have this thing called a vocabulary spurt, where all of a sudden you start to see that this child is learning new words very, very fast. And this, if it happens, like not all babies are going to experience this, but if it happens, it's around a year and a half, so 18 months of age. And you see that almost on a daily basis, it seems like that child is learning a lot more new words. In a really interesting way, these infants are learning new words across a wide variety of ways. So one of the things is that adults were really good at influencing that word learning, not only with infant-directed speech, but also with how we actually talk to infants, such as emphasizing certain words. So where's your nose? Where's your mouth, right? Those things are emphasizing objects that we really want them to know, and using very similar and easy spoken language. The amount and quality of speech that we hear also affects it. So we know that things like socioeconomic status may affect how many words children are hearing early on in life. But we also see that contexts are actually really quite important. So knowing whether or not this is in one place or another. So novel context or context where you only see something in one place. So for example, a towel might be something that children only see in a bathtub, or maybe the rubber ducky, for example. That novel context is actually going to allow them to learn that word a little bit faster. And we also see that maintaining that visual consistency. So if, for example, you always have your computer in one room, they might be able to learn computer a little bit more because that computer is always in the same spot. Whereas if you have a laptop and you're all over the place with it, they may have a harder time remembering the word laptop or computer because you're moving around. So there might be something about that consistency that's important. So we see that there are a couple of ways that new words are learned, one of which is called fast mapping. So if you had two things that you see and you ask, can you bring me the chartreuse one, not the red one? You may be going like, I have no idea what chartreuse is, but based on those two different things, I'm going to pick the one that is not red, right? So children are capable of doing that as well, and that's that process of fast mapping. So I'm going to show you a very quick video here. So this child is given two different shapes. She knows what a triangle is.
So I want you to give me the rectangle one, not the triangle one. Can you give me the rectangle one? Thank you.
So she's capable of giving her the rectangle because she realizes, I know what a triangle is, I don't know what a rectangle is. I'm going to give her the one that I don't know what it is. So that's one way to use context, right? Is fast mapping. Another one is the pragmatic cues. So this also helps us with word learning. Where is the other person looking? What is the intention? So for example, if a child is learning the word phone, it's much easier when it's like, hey, you and I are looking, here's a phone. Oh, sorry. Here's my phone. This is what a phone looks like. If instead you're on the phone behind the child and talking to somebody else, hey, did you get a new phone? They're not necessarily going to pick up on that word because your intention is not talking to that child. You may not even be looking at the child, right? So there is something about that social context that they're able to get and understand when we're talking about different words and how do we learn new words. So children are also able to produce words and put them together as simple sentences by the end of the second year of life. So almost close to their third year, right? So when we're thinking about this, again, comprehension and understanding is going to precede that production. So you can give a sentence to a child, please give me the triangle, And they will understand what that means much earlier than they can say, yes, I have a triangle. And the children's first sentences are often this thing called telegraphic speech. We don't have telegraphs anymore, but back in the day, they used to have these really short sentences because you would pay by word. So this is like when I first got my text messages, I would have to pay for numbers of words. Actually, I'd pay per text message. But anyways, this is where we get things like BRB, means be right back. So it's that same thing with children's first sentences. So it's 2-word utterances like drink juice, read me, play dog, and they all mean something, right? I want to go outside to play with the dog is play dog. So just to kind of leave it off, children are learning a whole lot of things in their first few months of life and first few years of life, going from these little creatures who don't understand a lot of things to being able to understand sentences and being able to produce them over the first 3 years of life. So I hope that you like this little child's boops.